Rain poured across downtown Chicago, transforming the city into a sea of shimmering lights and blurred reflections. The evening had all the ingredients of a romantic night, yet Madison Hale felt nothing close to excitement as she stepped out of her luxury sedan. For months, her friends had pressured her into taking a break from work. As the CEO of Hale Innovations, Madison spent most of her life building one of the fastest-growing technology companies in America. Investors admired her. Employees respected her. Competitors feared her. Yet behind the success existed a woman who rarely allowed anyone close. Eventually she gave in. One blind date. One dinner. One evening away from business. That was the promise she made herself. The restaurant chosen for the meeting was among Chicago's most exclusive locations. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the dining room while the city's elite enjoyed quiet conversations over expensive wine. Madison entered expecting an ordinary businessman or perhaps another ambitious executive. Instead, she found Adrian Moretti. The man waiting across the table possessed an unusual presence. He was calm without appearing passive, confident without appearing arrogant. His dark tailored suit looked flawless, yet it was his piercing eyes that immediately caught her attention. They seemed to observe everything. Miss nothing. For the first 20 minutes, the conversation flowed surprisingly well. Adrian was intelligent, well-spoken, and unexpectedly charming. He discussed international trade routes, shipping operations, and investment projects with remarkable expertise. Madison almost enjoyed herself. Almost. Then small details began appearing. A manager personally greeted Adrian and seemed nervous despite trying to hide it. Several employees subtly checked on his table without being asked. Certain guests recognized him instantly but avoided direct eye contact. The atmosphere around him felt different. Not celebrity. Not fame. Something else. Something powerful. Curiosity pushed Madison to ask additional questions. The answers only deepened her concern. Adrian owned shipping companies across multiple countries. Investment firms. Logistics networks. Private security operations. The list continued growing. It sounded impressive until Madison remembered rumors she had heard during business conferences. Stories about a mysterious businessman whose influence extended far beyond legitimate industries. Stories nobody discussed openly. Stories always spoken in a whisper. She discreetly searched his name while Adrian stepped away briefly to answer a call. What appeared on her screen immediately changed the evening. Articles connected him to organized crime investigations. Speculation linked him to powerful underground networks. Anonymous sources described him as one of the most influential figures operating behind Chicago's financial world. Nothing was officially proven. Yet fear quietly entered Madison's thoughts. By the time Adrian returned, her decision was already made. She had spent years building her company through discipline and integrity. Becoming involved with someone surrounded by such rumors was not a risk she was willing to take. No matter how attractive he seemed. No matter how intriguing he appeared. Danger followed him. And Madison refused to invite danger into her life. The remainder of dinner ended politely. Professionally. But emotionally distant. Soon afterward, Madison excused herself and left the restaurant. Relief washed over her as she stepped outside. Then she stopped. Completely. Her breath caught. Heart pounding. The entire street before her was lined with luxury vehicles. Not one. Not two. Dozens. Ferraris. Lamborghinis. Bugattis. Rolls-Royces. Vehicles worth millions stood parked beneath the rain-soaked city lights. At first she assumed there must be a celebrity event nearby. Then the restaurant doors opened. Adrian emerged. What happened next froze her in place. Every driver immediately stepped out of their vehicle. Every security professional straightened their posture. Every bodyguard lowered his head respectfully. Not toward a politician. Not toward a celebrity. Toward Adrian. The realization struck her instantly. This was not ordinary wealth. This was influence. Power. Control. The kind of power capable of moving entire industries. The kind of power people obeyed without being asked. As Adrian walked calmly toward the line of vehicles, nobody questioned him. Nobody challenged him. Nobody even looked surprised. Because to them this was normal. And suddenly Madison understood. Her blind date was not simply a businessman. He was the king of an empire. The mysterious rumors suddenly felt far more real. Fear returned stronger than before. Without hesitation, Madison hurried toward her car and drove away into the rain-covered streets. She told herself she had made the right decision. She told herself leaving was the smartest choice. Yet a strange feeling remained. A feeling she could not explain. as though the evening was not truly over. Several blocks later, she glanced into her rearview mirror. A black luxury SUV appeared behind her. At first it seemed like coincidence. Then it followed her through one turn. Then another. Then another. And a cold chill traveled down her spine. Madison tightened her grip on the steering wheel as the black SUV remained directly behind her. No matter which street she chose. No matter which direction she turned. The vehicle never disappeared. And for the first time that night, she wondered whether walking away from Adrian Moretti had been a mistake. Or the beginning of something far more dangerous. The black SUV remained behind Madison long after she left the restaurant. At first, she convinced herself it was nothing. Chicago was a busy city. Thousands of vehicles shared the roads every night. Yet as minutes passed, the same SUV continued appearing in her mirrors. Every turn she made was matched. Every lane change was mirrored. Fears slowly tightened around her thoughts. By the time she reached her downtown penthouse, the vehicle finally disappeared. But the uneasy feeling remained. The following morning, Madison buried herself in work, determined to forget the strange events of the previous evening. As CEO of Hale Innovations, she was accustomed to solving problems through logic and discipline. Unfortunately, logic failed to explain what happened next. 3 days later, one of her largest international contracts unexpectedly collapsed. The deal had been months from completion. Every negotiation had gone perfectly. Yet overnight, the client withdrew without explanation. Madison assumed it was unfortunate timing. Then another partnership disappeared. Then another. Within a week, several critical projects began unraveling simultaneously. The pattern was impossible to ignore. Someone was interfering. Someone powerful. The situation became even stranger when anonymous messages started appearing. No demands. No explanations. Only warnings. Messages advising her to stay away from Adrian Moretti. Messages suggesting she had become involved in matters she could not understand. Messages that felt less like threats and more like predictions. Madison's pulse accelerated every time another one appeared. Heart pounding. Questions multiplied. How did strangers know about a blind date that lasted less than 2 hours? Why did they believe she was connected to Adrian? And most importantly, who were they? The answer existed inside a world Madison had never seen. A rival syndicate had been quietly monitoring Adrian Moretti's activities for years. The organization viewed every relationship, every alliance, and every personal connection as a potential weakness. When reports surfaced that Adrian spent an evening with a powerful technology CEO, assumptions were made. Dangerous assumptions. To them, Madison was no longer an ordinary businesswoman. She was Adrian's woman. Whether it was true no longer mattered. Perception had already created reality. As the days passed, Madison noticed additional signs that someone was watching her. Unfamiliar vehicles appeared near company headquarters. Private meetings somehow became public knowledge. Business competitors suddenly possessed confidential information. Everywhere she looked, invisible eyes seemed to be observing. The uncertainty created constant fear. For the first time in years, Madison felt as though her carefully controlled life was slipping beyond her control. Meanwhile, Adrian received intelligence reports detailing everything that had happened. At first, he dismissed the information. Then he reviewed the details more carefully. The failed contracts, the anonymous warnings, the surveillance. The pattern was obvious. Madison had become collateral damage in a conflict she never chose. A conflict connected entirely to him. An unfamiliar feeling settled inside Adrian. Responsibility. He remembered the expression on her face when she walked away from the restaurant. The determination. The caution. The refusal to become involved with someone dangerous. Ironically, by walking away, she had attracted even more attention. Adrian understood the threat immediately. Rival organizations believed she mattered to him. That belief alone placed her at risk. For the first time since meeting her, his thoughts became personal. Protect her. The instinct arrived without hesitation. Without negotiation. Without logic. Madison had done nothing wrong. Yet she was paying the price for crossing paths with him. That was unacceptable. Within hours, Adrian quietly activated protective measures. Additional surveillance monitored her office building. Private security observed company events from a distance. Transportation routes were reviewed. Emergency protocols were prepared. Madison knew none of it. She only noticed something unusual. The feeling of being watched slowly began disappearing. Meetings became easier. Unknown vehicles vanished. Certain pressures eased. For reasons she could not explain, she felt safer. Safe. The feeling confused her because she did not know who was responsible. Nor did she realize that Adrian was personally reviewing updates regarding her safety every evening. Something about her continued pulling his attention back. Perhaps it was guilt. Perhaps curiosity. Perhaps something else entirely. Days later, Madison finally arrived home after another exhausting workday. The city skyline glittered outside her penthouse windows as she stepped off the elevator. Everything appeared normal. Quiet. Peaceful. Safe. Then she noticed something unusual. Her front door was slightly open. Only an inch. Barely noticeable. But enough. Her breath caught instantly. Every instinct warned her that something was wrong. And as she slowly approached the entrance, a cold chill traveled down her spine. Because she knew with absolute certainty. She had locked that door before leaving. Madison stood frozen in the hallway, staring at the partially opened door. Nothing inside made a sound. No movement. No voices. Only silence. Yet deep inside she knew someone had entered her penthouse while she was away. And for the first time since meeting Adrian Moretti, the danger no longer felt distant. It felt personal. Madison stood motionless outside her penthouse door, every instinct warning her not to enter. The silence inside felt wrong. Too perfect. Too deliberate. Her heart was pounding as she slowly pushed the door open. The living room appeared untouched. Furniture remained exactly where she had left it. Nothing seemed missing. Yet a strange feeling lingered in the air, as though someone had entered simply to send a message. Then she noticed it. A black envelope resting on the center table. No name. No explanation. Only a single sentence inside. You should have stayed away from Adrian Moretti. Fear settled deep inside her chest. For the first time, Madison understood that the warnings were no longer anonymous inconveniences. Someone wanted her frightened. Someone wanted her isolated. Someone wanted her to believe she was alone. Unfortunately for them, she wasn't. Less than an hour later, Adrian received a report from his security network. The unauthorized entry into Madison's penthouse confirmed what he already suspected. The rival syndicate had escalated their attention. Madison was no longer being observed. She was being pressured. Adrian immediately made a decision. The next morning, a black luxury sedan waited outside Hale Innovations headquarters. Madison knew exactly who sent it. She intended to refuse. Yet after another threatening message arrived during a board meeting, logic finally overpowered pride. By evening, she found herself arriving at Moretti Manor. The estate stretched across acres of private land outside Chicago. Iron gates protected the entrance while elegant stone architecture overlooked a peaceful lake. The property looked less like a residence and more like a private kingdom. A kingdom ruled by one man. The king everyone feared. The king she never intended to know. At first, Madison hated every moment of it. She disliked the security. She disliked the restrictions. Most of all, she disliked feeling dependent on someone else. As a CEO, she built her success through independence and control. Allowing Adrian to protect her felt dangerously close to surrender. Their first week together was filled with disagreements. Madison challenged nearly every precaution. Adrian calmly ignored most of her objections. The contrast between them became impossible to miss. She relied on logic. He relied on instinct. She trusted systems. He trusted people. She solved problems through data. He solved them through influence. Every conversation felt like a collision between two completely different worlds. Yet strangely, the differences drew them closer. Madison expected arrogance from a man with Adrian's power. Instead, she discovered discipline, patience, responsibility. The staff respected him genuinely rather than fearfully. Employees remained loyal not because they were forced to stay but because they chose to. Loyalty. The realization surprised her. For years, media rumors painted Adrian as a dangerous criminal mastermind. Yet the man she encountered each day looked very different from the legend. Likewise, Adrian found himself increasingly impressed by Madison. She refused special treatment. She asked intelligent questions. She noticed details others overlooked. More importantly, she never allowed fear to control her decisions. Even while facing genuine danger, she remained determined to protect her company and employees. The quality earned his respect. Slowly, walls began falling. Shared breakfasts turned into longer conversations. Business discussions evolved into personal stories. Late evenings in the estate library became routine. And during those quiet moments, Madison began seeing another side of Adrian. A side few people ever witnessed. One evening she discovered an old photograph tucked inside a book. The image showed a younger Adrian standing beside his father. For the first time he spoke openly about his past. About expectations. About responsibility. About inheriting an empire he never originally wanted. The confession changed something. The distance between them narrowed. Close. Not physically. Emotionally. Madison no longer saw only the powerful businessman. She saw the man carrying the weight of countless responsibilities. And Adrian no longer saw only a CEO caught in a dangerous situation. He saw a woman stronger than most people he knew. The connection deepened naturally. Neither discussed it. Neither acknowledged it. Yet both felt it. Safe. For the first time in weeks, Madison felt genuinely protected. And Adrian found himself thinking about her more often than he should. What? The thought arrived unexpectedly one evening before he immediately pushed it aside. Still, the feeling remained. Then everything changed. Late one night, Madison stayed behind in the estate's private office reviewing company reports. Most employees had gone home hours earlier. The mansion was unusually quiet. As she examined internal security files connected to the attacks against her business, something strange caught her attention. Several confidential reports had been accessed repeatedly. Not by outsiders. By someone inside Adrian's organization. Madison leaned closer to the screen. Her breath caught. The access records were impossible to ignore. Someone with trusted credentials had been sharing information. Someone close to Adrian. Someone positioned deep inside his empire. Madison stared at the confidential data in disbelief. The leaks responsible for exposing her movements, business meetings, and security arrangements were not coming from outside enemies. They were coming from inside Adrian's organization. And the person responsible had access to almost everything. Madison stared at the security logs long after midnight. The information on the screen refused to make sense. Every leak that exposed her movements, every compromised meeting, and every failed attempt to keep information confidential pointed toward the same disturbing conclusion. The problem was not outside Adrian Moretti's organization. It was inside. Someone with access to sensitive intelligence had been quietly feeding information to unknown enemies. For several minutes, Madison debated whether to tell Adrian immediately. The implications were enormous. If she was correct, the threat against her company and personal safety was connected to someone trusted within the empire itself. The following morning, she presented her findings. Adrian listened without interruption. Most people would have dismissed the theory. He didn't. What surprised Madison most was how seriously he took her concerns. There was no arrogance. No assumption that she misunderstood his world. Instead, he carefully reviewed every document she had gathered. The gesture revealed something important. He trusted her. Completely. The realization strengthened the connection already growing between them. Loyalty. Not forced. Earned. And increasingly difficult to ignore. Within hours, Adrian quietly initiated an internal investigation. Only a handful of people knew it existed. No accusations were made. No suspicions were shared. The goal was simple. Find the truth before the truth destroyed the empire. For the next several days, Madison worked alongside Adrian's intelligence team. Her background as a CEO gave her a unique advantage. While others focused on individual security breaches, she studied financial patterns. Money always left traces. Especially when someone believed they were smart enough to hide them. As she reviewed months of reports, a subtle pattern emerged. Small transactions. Minor transfers. Tiny adjustments that seemed meaningless alone. Together, however, they created a hidden map. Someone had been moving resources through multiple shell companies connected to legitimate businesses. The amounts were carefully disguised to avoid attention, but Madison recognized the strategy instantly. Corporate fraud rarely announced itself. It whispered. And these financial whispers led somewhere unexpected. Toward one of Adrian's most trusted divisions. The discovery created a new layer of concern. The individual responsible possessed significant authority. Enough authority to access confidential information. Enough authority to manipulate records. Enough authority to remain invisible for years. Danger no longer felt distant. It was standing inside the empire itself. The deeper the investigation went, the more unsettling the results became. Several security breaches matched internal schedules known only by senior personnel. Sensitive reports had been viewed minutes before rival organizations acted upon the information. Business negotiations were repeatedly compromised by someone who always seemed one step ahead. The pattern was too precise to be accidental. Someone was deliberately helping Adrian's enemies. One evening, Madison and Adrian sat together inside the estate library reviewing the latest findings. Rain tapped softly against the windows. The atmosphere felt unusually close. Neither spoke for several moments. The weight of the investigation hung heavily between them. Finally, Adrian broke the silence. For years he had built his organization on trust. Every success, every alliance, every victory depended upon people honoring their commitments. Now that foundation was cracking. The possibility troubled him more than any external threat ever could. Control was becoming harder to maintain because the enemy already knew too much. Madison understood exactly what he meant. As a CEO, she had experienced betrayal before. But betrayal from a trusted insider carried a unique kind of damage. It didn't simply threaten operations. It threatened belief. The investigation reached a turning point 3 days later. A confidential audit uncovered encrypted communications hidden within routine business records. The messages contained information that should never have left Adrian's organization. The sender's identity remained concealed. But the recipient was connected directly to the rival syndicate. For the first time they had proof. Real proof. Not theories. Not suspicions. Evidence. Madison felt her breath catch as the final report appeared. Heart pounding. Because one name kept appearing alongside every compromised transaction. Every suspicious communication. Every hidden transfer. A name Adrian trusted more than almost anyone. The name belonged to Luca Romano. His underboss. His advisor. His closest friend. The man who helped build the empire from the beginning. The room fell silent. Neither wanted to believe it. Yet the evidence continued pointing in the same direction. Again and again. And again. Adrian stared at the final page of the report, unable to look away. Every trail ended with Luca Romano. Every secret led back to him. The man Adrian trusted like a brother had somehow become the center of the conspiracy. And if the evidence was correct, the greatest betrayal in the empire's history was only beginning to reveal itself. The evidence against Luca Romano continued growing with every passing day. Adrian reviewed the reports repeatedly, searching for mistakes, hoping to find a reasonable explanation hidden somewhere between the numbers and encrypted communications. None existed. The truth remained unchanged. Luca Romano had betrayed him. For nearly 15 years, Luca had stood beside Adrian during every major decision. He helped expand the Moretti empire from a regional operation into one of the most influential business networks in Chicago. He attended family celebrations. He shared victories. He earned trust that few people ever received. And all along he had been hiding another loyalty. The realization created a wound deeper than any business loss. This was not merely deception. It was betrayal. The kind that shattered foundations. The kind that forced a man to question everything he believed about the people around him. As additional investigations unfolded, even darker truths surfaced. Luca had secretly maintained contact with a rival syndicate for years. Confidential business plans, financial strategies, and sensitive intelligence had quietly flowed through hidden channels. Every setback Adrian experienced suddenly made sense. Every compromised negotiation. Every failed expansion. Every unexplained obstacle. Someone had been feeding information to his enemies from inside the empire itself. And that someone had been standing at his side the entire time. Fear spread throughout the organization. Executives began questioning longtime colleagues. Managers became suspicious of one another. Departments stopped sharing information freely. Trust, once the empire's greatest strength, began disappearing. The fractures widened daily. Across Chicago, competitors sensed weakness. Rival organizations watched closely. Everyone understood the same thing. When loyalty collapses, power becomes vulnerable. Meanwhile, Madison found herself becoming increasingly important to the investigation. Her analytical skills had uncovered patterns nobody else recognized. Financial records, hidden transactions, and corporate structures revealed connections that ultimately exposed Luca's activities. Unfortunately, those discoveries made her valuable. And dangerous. Not to Adrian. To his enemies. Unknown observers started tracking her schedule more aggressively. Business meetings became targets for surveillance. Anonymous warnings increased. Even routine activities seemed monitored. Madison understood the risk. But she refused to retreat. As a CEO, she spent years overcoming challenges through intelligence and determination. Fear would not dictate her choices now. The decision only increased Adrian's concern. For the first time in years, maintaining control became difficult. The more danger surrounded Madison, the more personal everything felt. Protect her. The instinct remained constant, stronger each day. Adrian no longer viewed her safety as a responsibility. He viewed it as a priority. What? The thought surfaced again, impossible to ignore. Yet before either of them could address the growing tension between them, another crisis erupted. A critical financial summit was scheduled downtown. Several influential investors planned to attend. Madison's presence was considered essential. Despite security concerns, canceling the event would signal weakness. Neither side wanted that outcome. The meeting proceeded. At first, everything appeared normal. Executives arrived. Investors exchanged introductions. Business discussions filled the elegant conference center. But beneath the professional atmosphere, something felt wrong. Madison sensed it immediately. Small details. Unexpected schedule changes. Unfamiliar faces. Conversations that stopped when she approached. A subtle feeling of danger lingered beneath the surface. Hours later, after the summit concluded, Madison left through a private exit arranged by security. The vehicle waiting for her appeared legitimate. The driver possessed proper credentials. Every precaution seemed satisfied. Yet as the car pulled away from downtown Chicago, the route changed unexpectedly. Madison's pulse quickened. Heart pounding. The city skyline drifted farther away. The familiar streets disappeared. And suddenly she understood. Someone had planned this carefully. Very carefully. Back at Moretti Manor, Adrian received an emergency update. The protective team assigned to Madison lost contact. Her phone stopped responding. Her vehicle could no longer be located. For several seconds, silence filled the room. Then another report arrived. And another. None contained good news. Madison Hale had vanished. The realization hit Adrian harder than any betrayal. Harder than Luca. Harder than the collapsing trust inside his organization. Because this time the threat was not aimed at his empire. It was aimed at her. And somewhere beyond his reach, Madison was now in enemy hands. Around him, advisors discussed strategies and contingency plans. Adrian barely heard them. His focus remained fixed on a single truth. The war against him had entered a new phase. And Madison had become the center of it. Madison stared through the window of an unfamiliar luxury estate hidden far outside Chicago. The people holding her seemed strangely confident. Almost relaxed. As if they knew something she didn't. Then she overheard a whispered conversation from the next room. One sentence changed everything. She's worth more to us than Adrian realizes. And in that terrifying moment, Madison understood her capture was never about business. It was about something much bigger. Something connected to secrets Adrian had not yet discovered. Madison expected fear. What she did not expect was clarity. The moment she realized her disappearance was part of a much larger plan, something inside her changed. Panic would accomplish nothing. Waiting for rescue would accomplish even less. Whoever brought her to the remote estate believed they controlled the situation. They were wrong. The property itself was surprisingly elegant. Expensive artwork decorated the walls. Security systems monitored every entrance. Staff members moved quietly through the halls. Everything appeared civilized on the surface. Yet beneath the luxury existed a single purpose. Control. Her captors wanted information. Not through threats. Not through force. Through pressure. Subtle psychological pressure. Every conversation was designed to create doubt. Every carefully chosen statement attempted to convince her that Adrian's empire was collapsing. They spoke about betrayal inside his organization. They discussed powerful allies abandoning him. They suggested that the king she trusted was losing his influence. The goal was obvious. They wanted her to believe Adrian had already lost. They wanted her to stop believing in him. Instead, they revealed something valuable. Information. The more they talked, the more Madison listened. And the more she listened, the more she learned. As a CEO, Madison spent years reading people during negotiations. She understood that individuals often exposed secrets without realizing it. Tiny details hidden inside casual conversations could reveal entire strategies. The same principle applied here. Within days, she began noticing patterns. Names repeated frequently. Locations were mentioned carelessly. Business operations appeared connected in ways nobody intended her to understand. Her captors saw an isolated executive. They failed to recognize a strategist. Every day she quietly collected pieces of a puzzle. Every day the picture became clearer. Fear remained. Of course it did. Only a fool would feel completely calm under such circumstances. Yet fear no longer controlled her decisions. That distinction changed everything. For the first time since meeting Adrian, Madison realized how much she had evolved. Months earlier she walked away from a restaurant because rumors frightened her. Now she was standing inside the heart of an enemy operation, analyzing information with remarkable focus. She was not a victim. The realization felt powerful, unexpected, liberating. Meanwhile, Adrian continued searching relentlessly. His intelligence network expanded across multiple states. Business contacts, political allies, and private investigators worked continuously. Every lead received immediate attention. Still, progress remained frustratingly slow. The uncertainty was becoming unbearable. Not knowing where Madison was tested every ounce of his discipline. The loss of control disturbed him more than he wanted to admit. Because this was no longer simply about protecting a witness or an ally. It was Madison, the woman who challenged him, the woman who understood him, the woman who somehow became essential to his future. Back at the estate, an opportunity finally appeared. One evening, Madison gained temporary access to a private office while several senior figures attended a meeting elsewhere on the property. The room contained dozens of files and digital records. Most people would have searched desperately. Madison worked methodically. Minutes mattered. Accuracy mattered more. She focused on financial records, transportation schedules, and communication routes. Within a short time, she uncovered exactly what she needed. A network map. The document revealed multiple facilities connected to the rival syndicate. One location stood out immediately. Large investments. Heavy security. Frequent executive visits. Everything suggested a central headquarters. Heart-pounding, Madison memorized every detail she could. When the opportunity arrived, she discreetly transmitted a coded message through a secure channel she discovered inside the system. The communication was brief, precise, and incredibly valuable. Hours later, Adrian received it. For several seconds, he simply stared at the information. Then he understood. Madison had done what none of his investigators managed to accomplish. She found the center of the operation. A slow smile appeared for the first time in days. Not because the crisis was over. Because Madison had proven something important. She became powerful. Not through influence. Not through wealth. Through intelligence. Through courage. Through refusing to surrender. At that moment, Adrian realized the woman he intended to protect was also helping protect him. And that realization changed everything. The balance of power had shifted. The enemy believed they were holding their most valuable asset. In reality, they had handed Adrian exactly what he needed. Late that night, Adrian stood inside the war room of Moretti Manor, studying the location Madison had uncovered. Every major leader of the empire was present. Every available resource was being mobilized. The room felt different. Focused. Determined. For weeks, Adrian had been reacting to his enemies. That was about to end. As the massive digital map illuminated the room, the king finally gave a single order. And with those words, a full-scale retaliation against the rival syndicate officially began. The balance of power in Chicago shifted overnight. For weeks, Adrian Moretti had been forced into a defensive position, reacting to betrayals, hidden attacks, and carefully planned disruptions. Now everything changed. The information Madison uncovered exposed the rival syndicate's entire network. Secret partnerships, financial pipelines, political connections. Every hidden layer of influence became visible. For the first time since the conflict began, Adrian could see the complete battlefield. The war entered a new phase. Not a war fought with chaos. A war fought with strategy. Across the city, operations connected to the rival organization began collapsing one after another. Confidential documents surfaced revealing years of corruption. Business regulators launched investigations. Political figures who secretly supported the syndicate suddenly found themselves under intense scrutiny. Fear spread rapidly through circles that once felt untouchable. The enemy had spent years building influence. Now that influence was becoming a liability. At the center of the response stood Madison. Back inside Moretti Manor, she immediately joined Adrian's leadership team. Her experience as a CEO became invaluable. While others focused on eliminating individual threats, Madison analyzed larger patterns. She identified financial dependencies, hidden ownership structures, corporate vulnerabilities, entire networks of influence. The discoveries allowed Adrian's empire to move with unprecedented precision. Each decision created pressure. Each revelation weakened the enemy. And with every success, Madison earned greater respect. Senior advisors who once viewed her as an outsider now actively sought her guidance. Executives listened when she spoke. Strategic meetings increasingly revolved around her analysis. Without realizing it, she was becoming something much larger than a protected guest. She was becoming an essential part of the empire. A future queen. Meanwhile, Adrian watched her transformation carefully. The woman who once walked away from a blind date because she feared his world was gone. In her place stood someone stronger. Someone capable of navigating both business and power with remarkable confidence. Someone capable of standing beside a king without being overshadowed. The realization filled him with admiration. And something deeper. The citywide campaign continued accelerating. One by one, rival leaders lost their influence. Corporate allies abandoned them. Secret supporters disappeared. Financial resources became increasingly difficult to access. The syndicate's control weakened daily. For the first time, victory felt possible. Yet the greatest revelation arrived unexpectedly. Hidden files recovered during the investigation exposed years of political corruption connected to the rival organization. Public officials had secretly manipulated regulations, protected illegal business interests, and influenced major decisions for personal gain. The scandal shocked Chicago. News outlets exploded with coverage. Public trust collapsed. The rival syndicate suddenly found itself fighting on multiple fronts. Business, politics, public opinion. The pressure became overwhelming. Still, the enemy refused to surrender. Instead, they consolidated their remaining resources into one final operation. A desperate attempt to regain control. A final confrontation. Everyone understood its significance. If the plan succeeded, the syndicate might survive. If it failed, everything would end. Inside Moretti Manor, preparations began immediately. The atmosphere felt intense, focused, determined. Adrian remained calm throughout the process. A true king. Yet beneath the discipline, Madison sensed something different. Concern. Not for himself. For her. As the operation approached, Adrian quietly increased security around Madison once again. He reviewed contingency plans personally. He ensured every detail was perfect. Protect her. The instinct remained stronger than ever. Madison noticed. For the first time, she did not resist. Instead, she understood. The connection between them had evolved beyond partnership. Beyond loyalty. Beyond attraction. The realization arrived during a quiet moment overlooking the Chicago skyline. Neither spoke about the future. Neither discussed feelings openly. Yet both understood the truth. No matter what happened next, their lives would never return to what they were before. They had become part of each other's story. Part of each other's future. Hours later, reports began arriving. The final operation was underway. Every available resource from the empire moved simultaneously. The rival syndicate's remaining leadership found themselves surrounded by collapsing alliances and disappearing options. Victory was finally within reach. Then everything changed. An emergency message appeared on Adrian's secure communication network. The room fell silent. Expressions shifted instantly. Madison felt her breath catch. Heart pounding. Something had gone wrong. Very wrong. The final stage of the operation had encountered an unexpected complication. And Adrian was at the center of it. Minutes later, a secure report arrived at Moretti Manor. Madison opened it with trembling hands. The words on the screen stole the air from her lungs. The operation had succeeded. The rival syndicate was finished. But Adrian Moretti had been seriously injured during the final confrontation. As the empire celebrated victory, its king was fighting the most important battle of his life. And suddenly nothing else mattered. For 3 days, uncertainty gripped the Moretti empire. The operation that ended the rival syndicate had succeeded beyond expectations. Hidden networks collapsed. Corrupt alliances disappeared. Years of deception finally came to an end. Yet none of those victories mattered to Madison. Not while Adrian remained unconscious. The entire organization seemed suspended between celebration and fear. Employees continued working. Executives managed operations. Advisors handled the final stages of recovery. But everyone waited for the same thing. News about their king. Madison spent every available moment at the private medical estate where Adrian was recovering. For the first time since meeting him, she realized how deeply he had become woven into her life. The thought surprised her. Months earlier, she walked away from a blind date believing Adrian represented danger. Now the possibility of losing him felt far more frightening than any threat she had ever faced. When Adrian finally opened his eyes, relief swept through the room. And through her. A burden she had been carrying silently suddenly disappeared. For the first time in weeks, she could breathe normally again. Safe. The feeling returned stronger than ever. Not because the war was over. Because Adrian was still here. The recovery process took time, but his condition improved steadily. As news spread throughout Chicago, confidence returned to the empire. Business operations stabilized. Strategic partners re-established relationships. Opportunities that once seemed lost began returning. The organization emerged stronger than before. Ironically, the people responsible for trying to destroy the empire had only revealed its resilience. Meanwhile, Madison experienced her own transformation. Hale Innovations recovered dramatically following the exposure of corruption connected to the rival syndicate. Investors returned with renewed confidence. Expansion projects accelerated. Industry leaders praised her leadership during one of the most challenging periods in company history. The woman who had nearly lost everything months earlier was now stronger than ever. Professionally, personally, emotionally, she had changed. Not because someone rescued her. Because she refused to break. She became powerful. Not through fear. Not through influence. Through courage. The transformation did not go unnoticed. Across the empire, respect for Madison continued growing. Employees admired her intelligence. Executives trusted her judgment. Advisors valued her perspective. Even those who initially questioned her place inside Adrian's world eventually accepted an undeniable truth. She belonged there. Not as a guest. Not as a temporary ally. As something much greater. One evening, several weeks after Adrian's recovery, a private celebration was held at Moretti Manor. The event marked the official beginning of a new chapter for the empire. For the first time in months, the atmosphere felt peaceful. Laughter replaced tension. Hope replaced uncertainty. The future finally felt bright. As guests filled the grand ballroom, Madison found herself standing beside Adrian overlooking the celebration. Neither mentioned the battles behind them. Neither discussed the dangers they survived. Those chapters were finished. Instead, they focused on what came next. Their relationship had never been built on dramatic declarations. It had been built on actions. Trust. Loyalty. Protection. Every difficult moment had quietly strengthened the connection between them. And now that connection required no explanation. Madison looked around the ballroom and noticed something remarkable. The organization no longer viewed her as an outsider. They viewed her as family. The realization touched her more deeply than she expected. For years she built companies. Now she had found something even rarer. A place where she belonged. Close to Adrian, she finally understood what the future could look like. A future built together. A future she wanted. Without hesitation. Without fear. She chose him. And in doing so, accepted everything that came with him. The responsibility. The loyalty. The empire. The king. A quiet smile appeared on Adrian's face. Because he understood her choice without needing words. Mine. The thought returned one final time. This time he welcomed it. Not as possession. As partnership. As trust. As love. Together they stepped forward into a new era. A king. A queen. An empire stronger than ever before. The journey that began with a blind date had become something neither could have imagined. Yet fate was not quite finished with them. As the celebration neared its end, a confidential file arrived at Moretti Manor from an anonymous source. The document contained financial records connected to the entire conflict. Madison reviewed the information first. Then her expression changed. Slowly. Dangerously. Because the records revealed something impossible. The rival syndicate had never funded itself. Someone else had secretly financed every stage of the war from the very beginning. Someone wealthier, more powerful, and far more dangerous than anyone Adrian had faced before. As Adrian looked at the final page, one chilling realization settled over the room. The war they thought they had won may have only been the beginning.